Hey, this is Amanda, back with another video for Fairy Stamper, and today we're going to do an art journal page, which is something a little different for me. Usually I make cards, so I hope that you enjoy this. And today I'm going to show you, well, I'm going to call it a little bit of a variation on the Joseph's Coat technique. So here I'm showing you my art journal. This is a journal that I made. I use the Happy Planner binding system, or I believe it's called disc binding system, but I use the Happy Planner rings. And so I'm just showing you what my journal looks like, so you don't wonder why I'm working on a page that's just out of an art, not in an art journal, since most art journals are bound. I like the disc binding system. This way I don't make a huge mess and ruin all the pages in my art journal at once, because that's something that I would do. So I'm going to start off with gessoing my art journal page here. The pages in my art journal are Canson XL mixed media paper, I believe. And I like to apply my gesso with an ink blending tool. I find that I don't get streaks from a paintbrush, but if you prefer to use a paintbrush, that's fine too. Do what you like to do. So I'm just going to apply this really quick and then let it dry, because I'm applying such a thin layer with the ink blending tool. It dries really quick, but I do like to just make sure and blast it with my heat tool for just a minute or two. Well, probably not even a minute. Just go over it real quick with my heat tool when I'm done. So that's what I'll do. I don't even think I left any of that in at all. Sometimes I'll just leave like a couple seconds in just to remind myself that I did do it with the heat tool, but I don't even think I left that in this time. Oh, look, I did. Haha. All right, so I am going to bring out my Marabu Art Crayons. If you're not familiar with Marabu Art Crayons, they're pretty much the same exact thing as Gelatos. So if you have those, you can do this tutorial, or you can follow along this tutorial with those. They're pretty much exactly the same thing. So that is why I gessoed my page. Gelatos and Marabu Art Crayons and Distress Crayons and those kind of things, they seem to blend a lot better if you gesso your page. So if you are struggling with any of those mediums, I suggest that you gesso your paper and it will work a lot better. So I'm just gonna scribble, basically. This is gonna look like a kindergartner did it at first, or a 2-year-old, maybe even that. So I'm just gonna scribble a bunch of these colors down, and just get them down on the paper. I do have the colors listed down in the description box below if you are wondering what colors I used. I'm not going to list each individual color like I often do with inks and such, because I'm just going so fast here that it was going to be a pain in the butt to do that. So I do have the colors listed down in the description box below if you're curious what colors I used. But I did use a variety of colors here. There's really no rhyme or reason why I'm doing this. Well, there kind of is. The pink and the orange and the yellow was kind of like a sunset or a sunrise. The purples and the oranges and the green, or the purples, the greens and blues were kind of more of a like a ground. That was kind of my reasoning, but other than that, there really was no rhyme or reason. So I have a wet baby wipe here, and that is what I'm using to blend this out. You do want to use something wet. They blend easier when they're wet. I've seen some people use a dry finger, but I find that these blend easier when you use a wet baby wipe or a wet moist towel or something along those lines. Use water anyway. You could probably spray it with a water bottle and just use a towel or your finger. I had baby wipes close by, so that's what I grabbed. So I'm just going to go through and just rub this baby wipe all over here and just blend out the scribbles so I don't have as many harsh lines as what I have on the paper here. And until I'm happy, I am going to go in with another round of color, not quite as much as I had originally. Using the wet baby wipe, it does tone down the color quite a bit. The baby wipe is picking up color, so if you keep wiping on this page, eventually you will wipe most of the color off. I mean, it is going to stain the page some, but it's not going to it's not going to be as vibrant as it was when I initially laid down the color. So here I am coming in with a little bit more purple. I think I'm going to add a little bit more pink to the sky, some blue down here where there's a bunch of green, that kind of stuff. I'm just going to add just a little bit more color. I'm not going to go over completely the whole thing, but I am going to add just a little bit more color until I'm happy. And then I'm going to blend that out with that baby wipe again. And then we will move on to the next step in our makeshift, maybe not really makeshift, but our Joseph's coat technique that isn't quite done the way you have seen most Joseph's coat techniques done. So I didn't know what else to call it, but you get the same results as the Joseph's coat technique. If you're not familiar with the Joseph's coat technique, I guess I should tell you what that is. So the Joseph's coat technique is where you do a blended background, whether you do it in inks or whatever color medium you want, and then you use VersaMark and stamp a design, and then clear heat emboss over it, and then you take black ink and you ink blend over the entire panel, and then the only design that you will have left is where you clear heat embossed over whatever image that you chose to heat emboss. So you're basically going to end up with the same results here as what I am doing now. So this is a stencil from Pink Ink Designs. It is called Fantasy Fungi. It just popped up on the screen and I totally missed it. Yes, Fantasy Fungi, and I just thought this stencil was absolutely fabulous. This should be available at the Fairy Stamper store. I just purchased it just like 2 weeks ago, I think, so I would assume that it is still available at the Fairy Stamper store. If it is, I will link it in the description box below. And then I'm just taking some black gesso here, again with my ink blending tool, and I'm going to cover the entire page. Now I am holding my stencil in place. You could maybe use pixie spray. I'm not sure if that would work here. The crayons are wax based. They're water soluble wax crayons, so I'm not sure that the pixie spray would stick in this instance. The reason why I didn't use pixie spray is because I'm going to be doing some heat embossing after I get this all filled in and my design down. So I've had issues with pixie spray leaving residue. I know it's not supposed to leave residue, but I've had issues with it leaving residue. And so I don't like to use pixie spray when I'm going to do some heat embossing, because then my powder sticks all over the place where I don't want it to, and it makes a big mess. And I really don't appreciate that. So that is why I did not use pixie spray. And I didn't use tape to hold this down because, well, I'm going to cover this entire page with black gesso and the tape would have been in the way. So my only choice here was to hold the stencil down, which was kind of a pain in the rear. So I filled in the inside here, and then now I'm going around to the edges of the stencil, and I'm just going to go around enough that when I remove the stencil, I don't have to have the stencil in place anymore. I will have enough of a black edge that I can come in with my ink blending tool and go around that area, and it won't be a problem anymore. I don't have to have the stencil masking off my design. So I'm just going to go over this one last time, just make sure everything's black enough inside that stencil. I'm going to remove the stencil, go wash it off immediately because the gesso dries really quick and I really don't like to have my stencil stained. I'm a little OCD about that. So you didn't see me go wash that off because I cut it out, obviously. And now I'm coming in and I'm going to just fill in the last little bits on the edges, and then we will be done with this part of the gessoing. So that really didn't take that long. Obviously it took longer for me than it did for you because I sped this up quite a bit. I am trying to keep my matte kind of clean because the back side of this paper is, going to be an art journal page too. I can gesso over it. It's not that big of a deal, but I'm trying to keep it somewhat clean. It did get pretty messy, but I'm trying to keep it as clean as possible. So that's why I keep cleaning off my mat. And then, so now we've got this pretty well filled in, and there is our Joseph's coat technique. Now, because I'm making an art journal page, I'm of course going to add other things to it. So I'm using my anti-static powder tool here, and I'm placing my fairy Eris, however you want to pronounce that, over this one mushroom that I don't know if you noticed, but I did get some black paint under my stencil. That little mushroom cap got a little wonky because, again, since I didn't use pixie spray or anything to hold down my stencil, I got a little black paint where I didn't want it. So I'm going to cover that up. Mistakes are just a chance to embellish. So I'm just going to ink this up real well with VersaMark and stamp her down. I did ink this up twice. I cut it out for time purposes. I'm only going to show it to you once. I think we all know how to stamp twice with a stamp positioner, or at least most of us should. If you don't, you just ink it up again and put it down because your paper should be in the corner. And then I'm going to take some white embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp here, and I'm just going to cover that image up, and off screen I am going to heat emboss it. Just make sure that your tool is good and hot, and you should be ready to go. Now, because this panel was so large and sticks out of my stamp positioner here, I did have to flip this around and go again. So I have got Azalea and the Happy Moon image in here. I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool again and ink these both up and stamp them as well. Now, I wasn't covering any boo-boos with these, so that, well, I guess there might have been a little boo-boo on that little swirly image that I didn't notice until just now, but that's okay. There is no crying in art journaling. So when you make a mistake, you just cover it up or you roll with it. I actually have a page that says there's no crying in art journaling. So I started my art journal because I was in therapy and I needed a way to de-stress. And yes, crafting is a de-stressor for me, but I make a lot of my cards. Oh, stop. Wait a second. So I'm using a VersaMark pen just to fill in where I realized that I missed a little spot with the embossing ink. So the VersaMark pen is a very handy tool to have. All right, so anyway, I was in therapy and I realized that I make a lot of my cards for gifts. Oh, wait a second. So solid images sometimes don't heat emboss the most even. So you can see the little pitting in my image there. So sometimes people will just tell you to heat emboss over it, stamp your image again and heat emboss over it a second time, which you can do. I find with the solid images, sometimes that doesn't give me the best result. I'll still end up with the pitting in the same spots. So I just take my VersaMark pen and I just dot in those little pits. And then I pour the powder over it and heat emboss those. And then I know for sure that those little pits will be filled in. So there's a little tip for you. All right, now back to my story. So anyway, the art journaling, I started it because when I was card making, I make a lot of them for gifts, and I just wanted them to be so perfect that that I would get really stressed out when I'd make a mistake. So I started the art journal because that was just for me. There was no expectation for it to be perfect. It was just for me and just for my eyes only, and I didn't care if I made a mistake. And so this is my first page that I'm actually sharing online with anybody. So I hope that you enjoy it. But that's why I started art journaling. So if you find that you are stressed out about making mistakes, maybe you could start something like this for yourself. I am now to the point where I don't get as stressed out about making mistakes in card making, that I can make a mistake and I roll with it and I find ways to fix it. But I was at a point several years ago where when I made a mistake, it was a big deal. So that was where the reference, the no tears in art journaling, came from. That was one of the first pages I made in my art journal, that there were no tears in art journaling, because I would get that stressed out about my card making and making other gifts and crafting. All right, so back to the card. I am just mixing a little bit of gesso here with some water and just splattering some stars on here because did not add enough powder or something to my anti-static powder to my page, and I did get some white embossing flakes all over the place. So I just thought I'd cover them up with some gesso. Now I should have done this a little bit later in the page because I ended up adding some extra things to this page that I really wasn't planning on, and I ended up covering up the white dots with some color, but that's okay. I just ended up doing it off screen later again and adding my white dots back on. So I'm taking some Ranger texture paste in Opaque Matte, and I'm just going to add some stars up here to the top just to add a little bit more texture and give it more of a night scene feel. And I just wanted them just above the stenciling here, that circle part of the stencil. So I'm trying to be very careful to keep them just above that. But if you scrape the paste off before it's dry, it's not usually a huge deal, especially because of the colors. Like, see, I'm scraping it off right now. On the black, you could probably see it, but because of the light colors that I used up there on that circle part, I don't really know what you would call that, but it's a circle part to me. It didn't really show. If it was on a dark part, it might have showed. And then I was just trying to be careful here too, to not get it on places that I didn't want it on. I could have masked, but I was feeling lazy. Again, I don't go for extreme perfection with my art journal pages. And then I brought out this Ciao Bella stencil set. This is Let the Music Fly, and I thought it would be kind of cool to have, well, music flying out of that saxophone there that Eris is holding. So I decided to take just this part of the stencil with the music notes and the staff and stencil that on there. So then when I'm done with my texture paste, I do like to wipe off the rim of the jar and put some saran wrap over it and close that lid tight, and that helps keep my stencil my pastes, any kind of paste that I use in crafting, from drying out. So to color my texture paste after it is fully dry, I just took some Dylusions sprays and sprayed it on there, and then for the stars, well, actually for both, I just took a little bit of water and just kind of smeared it around, make sure I got all those stars covered, and then I dabbed up the extra with a towel and dried it with my heat tool carefully. For the music notes here, I thought maybe I could just take the end of the spray nozzle and kind of selectively put it on there, but then I realized how much of a pain in the rear that was going to be and how long it was going to take. So then I just went in and sprayed it on there. The wax crayon somewhat resists it, but it did take on some of the color. So just keep that in mind. The embossing powder will resist it a little bit too, but be sure to wipe it off right away. I don't know how much it's going to resist it because the dilution sprays, boy, do they stain. I mean, they will stay on my fingers for a while. So I got my fingers and nails pretty stained, and they stain your nails for days. So I did want to cover up that embossing powder just in case. I did end up, when I sprayed this, I ended up spraying Azalea up there, so I had to wipe her off. So I got a baby wipe here, and I'm just wiping off the things that I did not want the dilution spray on. I was able to lift some of that spray off my mushroom stenciling, but it did color it. So if you didn't want to have it colored, you might want to put the spray in the paste before you stenciled. That might have been a better option. Like I said, I didn't do that. I really wasn't thinking. I was kind of thinking I was going to leave it white, but the problem with that was my embossing powder is shiny and the texture paste is an opaque matte. So matte and the shiny just didn't go well together. So that's why I decided to color it after the fact. And well, I ended up spraying everywhere. I don't think it turned out fine in the end. It's not exactly the same coloring as it was to begin with. So because my music staff blends in so much with the background of the mushroom stencil, I ended up going over it with white gel, or around it with white gel pen to make it stand out a little bit more. And then I'm coming in with a Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen and glitter gloss and going over the music staff. I went over the moon as well. Just be sure to wipe off your Nuvo shimmer pen before you go on to something else, because it will pick up that Dylusions. So if you go from a blue to a yellow, you're going to get green. So just be sure to wipe that off, see, as I just did there. So be sure to wipe that off between colors. And then I don't remember if I did this on camera or not. Oh, I think I showed a little bit. Now I'm coming in with, yep, now I'm coming in with my Sakura Stardust glitter pens and just coloring in the fairy's wings. I'm not going to show all of that on camera, just a little bit. I did blue on Eris and purple on Azalea. And I believe that's it. Oh, off screen, I did do the Make a Wish sentiment from Fairy Hugs. You'll see that in the final pictures. I did not do that on screen. It was something that I kind of did like when I was taking the pictures. And to finish off all my journal pages, I do like to date them in the corner, just so I know looking back when I did these pages. So that finishes off the card for or not the card, that finishes off our art journals for today. I hope that you liked the project today. I know that it was a little bit longer video. All the supplies are linked in the description box below, as well as my social media links and the social media links and website for Fairy Stamper. And the Facebook group. We have challenges over there and share our projects and have a lot of fun. I hope that you will check out those links. And as always, have a great day.